investment. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. All right, we need to talk because a lot of you have been blowing up the comments, e-messages, everything investment, about reports that the Iraqi Gazette has confirmed a dinar rate, and that somehow this means dinar holders, your time is here in 2026. Investment, I know those words hit like electricity if you've been holding for years, maybe even decades. But before anyone starts celebrating panic buying investment or making life plans overnight, let's slow this down and walk through what this could actually mean in the real world. And first, quick disclaimer, investment. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give dates. I don't give rates. Investment. And nobody on YouTube has insider authority over sovereign currency decisions. We're talking about publicly circulating information, historical patterns, investment, plausible scenarios, and common sense preparation so you can think clearly for yourself. Now, when people hear Gazette confirms, they often imagine something like a giant stamp that says, "Okay, world, investment, flip the switch." But government gazettes don't work that way. A gazette is essentially an official publication where laws, decrees, regulations, investment, and policy changes are formally recorded. It's a legal notice system, not a fireworks announcement. Sometimes what gets published is procedural, investment. Sometimes it's administrative, sometimes it's forward-looking policy that doesn't take effect immediately. So if something related to currency appears there, investment. It doesn't automatically mean you can run to the bank the next morning. But, and this is important, it also doesn't mean it's meaningless. Investment, official publications are part of the implementation chain. Think of them as documentation that something has moved from discussion into formal recognition. Investment, not necessarily execution, but recognition. Let's use a simple analogy. Imagine a city council approves a plan to build a new highway. The approval gets published. Investment. That doesn't mean the road exists the next day. There's land acquisition, engineering, environmental review, funding allocation, contractor bidding, investment. Construction faces years of steps between approval and opening day. Currency reform can be similar. Now, regarding investment, the phrase confirms a rate could mean several different things depending on context. It could refer to accounting adjustments, budget assumptions, investment internal conversion metrics, or legal frameworks that reference an exchange value for administrative purposes. Investment governments constantly reference currency values in policy documents for tariffs, taxes, public salaries, import pricing, oil revenue calculations, and debt servicing. Investment. Those references don't necessarily represent a tradable market rate available to foreign holders. However, investment, when such references begin appearing more frequently or in more prominent legislation, it can signal that monetary authorities are aligning systems toward a future state. And alignment is a key concept here. A country can't just change a currency value in isolation. Banks must be ready. Payment systems must be calibrated. ATMs, investment. Accounting software, international clearing networks, trade contracts, everything that touches money has to agree on the new framework. Otherwise, you get chaos. Investment, so what we watch for are signs of synchronization. Over the past several years, Iraq has been working on modernization across multiple sectors, digital payments, measures, banking reforms, attempts to reduce cash dependency, efforts to stabilize the private sector. None of that guarantees a revaluation investment, but it does suggest preparation for deeper integration into the global financial system. Because ultimately, currency strength isn't just about resources like oil. Investment, it's about trust in institutions. Foreign investors, trading partners, and multinational corporations want predictability. They want to know contracts will be honored. Investment funds can move freely. Regulations won't change overnight. A stable, credible currency is part of that environment. Now let's address the emotional side, because I know a lot of you are tired. You've seen headlines like this before. This is it. Any day now. Confirmed. And each time, investment. Either nothing happened or progress was slower than expected. That kind of cycle can make people swing between extreme optimism and total burnout. Investment. If you've been holding dinar since the early 2000s or even the 2010s, you've essentially been participating in a long duration speculative position. Investment, not a typical investment with quarterly reports and dividends, but a geopolitical macro play, and macro plays move at glacial speed until they don't. Investment. History shows that major monetary shifts often appear impossible right up until the moment they occur. Then suddenly everyone acts like it was obvious. Investment. But during the build-up phase, information is fragmented, contradictory, and hard to interpret. So when something like a Gazette reference surfaces, investment. The balanced response is neither blind celebration nor cynical dismissal. It's careful attention. What exactly was published? Who published it? Investment. What legal authority does it carry? Is it implementation or groundwork? Those questions matter far more than the headline itself. Another thing to consider is internal versus external impact. Investment, a policy might affect domestic transactions first while international exchange mechanisms remain unchanged temporarily. Investment. Governments sometimes stabilize their internal economy before opening the gates globally. Imagine adjusting public sector salaries, pensions, investment, or pricing structures inside the country. That could require referencing a different value framework, even if foreign exchange markets haven't caught up yet. And remember, Iraq's economy is heavily tied to oil revenues, which are priced internationally in major currencies. Any change to the dinar's value interacts with those revenue flows, investment, budget planning, and sovereign obligations. So authorities would want to control transition, not a shock event. Let me give you a scenario to think about. Investment. Suppose Iraq intends to strengthen its currency over time. Step one might be legal and administrative groundwork, publishing relevant policies. Investment. Step two might involve banking system readiness. Step three could involve trade adjustments and reserve management. Investment. Only after those layers are stable would a visible market shift occur. From the outside, it might look like nothing is happening for years. Investment. Then suddenly everything happens at once. In reality, it was a long staircase hidden behind a curtain. Investment. Now I also want to address the phrase, your time is here. That kind of language is powerful, but it can also be dangerous if it triggers impulsive behavior. Investment. Your time isn't determined by a headline. It's determined by preparation, meeting opportunity. If you're holding currency, ask yourself practical questions. Investment. Do you know how you would verify exchange availability? Do you understand your country's regulations on foreign currency transactions? Investment. Do you have secure storage and transportation plans? Do you know how taxes might apply? These are not glamorous topics, investment, but they are the difference between chaos and control if something significant occurs. Another overlooked aspect is psychological readiness. Sudden financial change, even positive, can be disorienting. Decision fatigue sets in. People second guess everything. Some freeze, others overspend. Preparation reduces that stress dramatically. Investment. And for those of you who don't hold large amounts, don't fall into the trap of comparing yourself to others. Online spaces amplify extremes. Investment. Someone always claims to have more, know more, or be closer to the action. Your situation is your situation. Investment. Financial peace doesn't come from matching someone else's numbers. It comes from managing what you have wisely. Now let's pivot briefly to 2026. Investment, since that year, keeps popping up in discussions. Long-term national plans often use target years, development visions, infrastructure goals, diversification timelines, investment. These are not countdown clocks, they're directional milestones. If policymakers say they want economic transformation by a certain year, investment, it means they're aligning projects toward that horizon. Some finish early, some late, some not at all. Investment. So referencing 2026 doesn't necessarily mean a single event will occur exactly then. It suggests a planning window. Investment. And planning windows are useful because they tell you the direction of travel even if the exact path isn't visible. At the same time, global conditions matter too. Investment, energy markets, regional stability, trade routes, international alliances all influence how and when monetary decisions are made. No country operates in a vacuum. Conditions are volatile. Authorities may delay major moves even if internal preparations are complete. Stability favors bold reforms. So again, investment context is everything. I know some of you want a simple yes or no answer, is this it? But real geopolitics rarely offers simplicity. It offers probabilities. Right now, investment. The probability signal from something like an official publication is that processes are moving, not necessarily that the finish line has been crossed. And honestly, investment's still meaningful because the worst scenario for long-term holders isn't slow progress, it's stagnation. Movement, even incremental investment, indicates the system hasn't abandoned reform. All right, guys, I'm going to pause here because there's a lot more to unpack, and especially how official publications translate into real world action, what steps might come next, investment, and the biggest mistakes people make when they think the moment has arrived. If you want the next part, just let me know. All right, guys, let's keep going. Investment. So we just talked about what it actually means when something shows up in an official publication and why that doesn't automatically equal run to the bank. Now we need to dig deeper into how something moves from printed policy to practical reality. investment, because that middle phase is where most people get confused. When people say, the Gazette confirmed the dinar rate, the first question you should ask is, investment confirmed for what purpose? Governments reference exchange values in different contexts all the time. Investment. There's the program rate used for certain internal accounting functions. There are budget rates used to estimate oil revenue and spending. Investment. There are customs and tariff calculations. There are internal settlement rates between ministries. Investment. And then there's the tradable rate that international markets recognize. Those are not always the same at every stage of reform. Investment. Let's walk through a realistic scenario so you can visualize this. Imagine Iraq is preparing for a structural currency shift. Before any international adjustment happens, investment, they would need internal consistency. That means public payroll systems, pension systems, tax systems, and import pricing must be recalibrated. Investment. If government workers are paid in dinar and the value changes, that affects everything: purchasing power, subsidies, contracts, and private sector wages. Investment. You can't just flip a currency value without recalculating the entire domestic economy. So if something appears in the Gazette referencing a rate framework, investment, it could be step one in synchronizing those systems. That's not hype, that's logistics. And here's the part most people overlook: investment. Central banks care about stability more than excitement. They would rather delay and get it right than rush and cause panic. Investment. Think about what would happen if there were leaks, confusion, or conflicting numbers across institutions. Markets hate uncertainty. Speculators attack weak systems. Capital flows can move unpredictably, so any major monetary move would likely involve quiet preparation long before loud announcements. Now let's pivot back to investment. The emotional hook in that phrase is, your time is here. I get it. It feels like validation after years of patience. But here's the grounded perspective. Investment. Your time isn't about a headline, it's about positioning. If Iraq is indeed aligning for a stronger currency structure, investment. What we should expect to see are reinforcing indicators, banking modernization, improved compliance with international financial standards, investment, reduced parallel market gaps, more transparent reporting, greater integration with global settlement systems. When those pillars stand solidly together, investment, then you're looking at an environment that could support a visible shift. And some of those things have been progressing over the past few years. Slowly, yes. Investment, imperfectly, yes, but progress nonetheless. Let me give you another example to frame this properly. After major economic reforms in other countries historically, there was usually a period where official documentation preceded market action. Laws were passed, regulatory frameworks were updated, central banks issued circulars. Investment. Only after the plumbing was set did the visible change occur. From the outside, it seemed sudden. From the inside, it was methodical. Investment. Now I want to talk directly to those of you who've been holding for a long time and are starting to feel cautious whenever confirmation language appears. Investment. That caution is earned. There have been many cycles of excitement over the years: budget seasons, election cycles, oil price spikes, international meetings. Each time, investment. Rumors escalate. Each time, expectations rise. Each time, reality unfolds at its own pace. But here's the difference now compared to years ago. Iraq's financial system is far more connected to the global economy than it was a decade ago. Digital banking has expanded. Investment, international compliance pressure has increased. Regional trade corridors are being developed. Oil revenue management has become more structured. Investment. Those aren't overnight changes. They're foundational shifts. Foundations matter because a strong currency without a strong system collapses. And that brings us to 2026 again. Long-term planning cycles typically align with economic diversification goals. Iraq has openly discussed reducing reliance on oil. Investment, building private sector growth, attracting foreign investment, and modernizing infrastructure. Those are multi-year objectives. Investment, if policymakers are targeting 2026 as a milestone for broader economic transformation, currency reform could logically fall within that window, not because of hype, investment, but because monetary structure supports investment credibility. Investors want predictability. If Iraq wants large-scale foreign direct investment, a stable and transparent currency regime helps. But, and this is important, stability does not require a massive overnight rate change. Investment, it could involve gradual strengthening, managed adjustments, or structural reform that improves purchasing power internally first. Investment. There are multiple paths to currency evolution. Now let's talk about something practical: how to interpret news without overreacting. When you see a headline, Investment. Don't stop at the headline. Look for primary sources. Was it actually published in an official channel? What exact language was used? Was it a draft law or enacted law? Was it referencing implementation or planning? Precision matters. For example, a document might say, for the purposes of calculating X investment, the rate shall be. That doesn't necessarily mean the public exchange rate has changed. It means that for that specific calculation, a value is being applied. Investment context changes meaning entirely. Another realistic scenario to consider is phased rollout. If Iraq were to implement a new currency framework, investment, it might begin with interbank settlements and large-scale commercial transactions before reaching retail exchange windows internationally. Investment. That ensures liquidity management and prevents arbitrage chaos. Remember, currency markets are global and highly leveraged. Even small missteps can create volatility. Investment. So if you're expecting a dramatic, cinematic moment where everything changes in one day worldwide, history suggests it's more nuanced than that. Investment. Now let's shift gears slightly and talk about mindset again. If you've been holding for years, investment, it's easy to build your identity around waiting. Waiting becomes part of your routine. Checking updates becomes habitual. Speculating becomes entertainment. Investment. But if something truly shifts, that waiting identity has to transition into a decision-making identity. That's a big psychological shift. Investment. Suddenly you're not asking when, you're asking what now. And that question requires clarity. Do you have a post-exchange plan sketched out even loosely? Investment. Do you understand basic asset protection concepts? Have you thought about tax planning in your country? Do you know how to avoid common financial pitfalls? Preparation isn't pessimism, it's maturity. And if nothing immediate happens, you lose nothing by being prepared. Now let's address skepticism head on. Investment, some people will say, we've heard this before. That's fair. Skepticism protects you from being manipulated by hype cycles. But the key is balanced skepticism, investment, not automatic dismissal. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. And just because something is published doesn't mean it happens tomorrow. Investment. The truth usually lives in the middle. Right now, if official documentation is referencing rate structures in a more visible way, that's a data point. It's not the final chapter, it's not the opening credits, it's somewhere in the narrative, and narratives unfold. All right, guys, investment. We've covered how official confirmation could function, how implementation might look, and how to interpret signals without overreacting. In the next part, investment, we need to talk about what smart preparation looks like if momentum continues, what mistakes to avoid if something big happens, investment, and why the first 90 days after any major change are more important than the headline itself. All right, guys, let's finish this out strong. We've talked about what an official publication could mean, how implementation might actually unfold, and why confirmation doesn't automatically equal instant access. Investment. Now we need to talk about the part almost nobody focuses on, what happens if momentum really does continue and something meaningful eventually occurs. Because the headline moment is not the most important part of this journey. What you do immediately after is. And again, quick reminder, this is not financial advice. Investment. I don't give rates, I don't give dates, and nobody here should be making life-altering decisions based on speculation alone. Investment. We're walking through realistic scenarios so you can be calm, informed, and prepared instead of reactive. Now imagine this. Investment. You wake up one day and credible mainstream financial outlets, not rumors, not screenshots, not anonymous posts, investment are discussing a major change involving Iraq's currency framework. Banks acknowledge it. Official statements clarify it. Markets react. Your heart rate goes up instantly. Investment. But here's the surprising truth. Even in that scenario, you probably would not need to sprint anywhere within minutes. And transitions don't reward panic. They reward order. Institutions need time to implement procedures. Banks need internal guidance. Investment. Compliance teams need protocols, exchange channels need liquidity, systems need synchronization. There's usually a window, not infinite, but not seconds either. Investment. So the smartest move in a high impact situation is controlled patience. Now let's bring it back to, if something truly shifts within that broader time frame, your first job is verification, not social media verification, not a friend of a friend verification. Investment, actual confirmation from institutions that can execute transactions, major banks, official government announcements, recognized financial networks. Why? Investment, because misinformation spreads fastest during moments of excitement. There will be scams, there will be fake exchange offers. There will be pressure tactics claiming limited time opportunities. Unfortunately, whenever money is involved, opportunists appear. So rule number one, investment. Trust infrastructure, not noise. Now let's talk about practical preparation that you can do long before any event. MS, because preparation done calmly is far more effective than preparation done under pressure. Documentation is huge. If you hold physical currency, investment, do you know exactly where it is? Is it secure? Is it organized? Can you transport it safely if necessary? Investment, do you have proof of purchase or at least a reasonable record of acquisition? Financial institutions may ask questions about source of funds. That's not suspicion. Investment, it's compliance law in most countries. Next, identification and banking access. Make sure your IDs are current. Investment, make sure your bank accounts are active and in good standing. If you don't currently bank with a major institution, investment, consider establishing that relationship now rather than during chaos. Banks prioritize existing clients. Another thing people rarely think about is communication planning. If something big happens, phone lines, websites, and branches could be overwhelmed temporarily. Investment, having multiple ways to access your accounts online, mobile, in person gives you flexibility. Now let's talk about what happens after liquidity hits your account. Investment, because this is where fortunes are preserved or destroyed. The emotional surge of seeing a large balance can override rational thinking. Investment, your brain jumps straight to spending scenarios. You start calculating upgrades, gifts, investments, dreams deferred for years. None of that is wrong, but timing matters. Investment, one of the smartest moves after any sudden wealth event is to create a cooling off period. Weeks, even months where you make no irreversible decisions. Let reality settle, let professional advice come in, let your mind adjust. Sudden wealth syndrome is a real phenomenon. It includes anxiety, insomnia, impulsivity, guilt, and distrust, all kinds of psychological effects. Planning ahead helps neutralize that shock. Another critical factor is privacy. Investment, you are not obligated to disclose your financial status to anyone beyond what is legally required. Publicizing numbers can create pressure, expectations, investment, and security risks. Quiet success is safer than loud success. If you want to help family or community, and many of you do, structure matters. Sustainable generosity beats spontaneous generosity. You can change lives without destabilizing your own. Now let's zoom out again to the macro level. Investment. If Iraq strengthens its currency meaningfully, it would likely reflect broader economic confidence, stable oil revenues, improved governance structures, investment, growing non-oil sectors, increasing foreign investment. Currency values is a symptom of systemic health, not just a policy switch. For global markets, investment. Such a move would signal that Iraq is positioning itself as a more predictable economic partner. For citizens inside Iraq, it could affect purchasing power, wages, investment, imports, and cost of living. For foreign holders, it would represent the culmination of a long speculative thesis. But remember, different groups experience the same event differently. And for Vietnam, since many of you track both IQD and VND, any currency evolution there would likely follow its own economic logic: export competitiveness, manufacturing strength, trade balances, investment, central bank policy designed to avoid shocks. Two countries, two trajectories. Now I want to speak directly to those of you who feel like you've been waiting forever. Investment, patience fatigue is real. You start to wonder whether you've wasted time, whether you should stop paying attention, whether the whole thing is just noise. Investment, then a headline appears and pulls you right back in. Here's a healthier perspective. You don't have to obsess to stay prepared. Set boundaries. Investment, check updates at reasonable intervals. Focus on your life, your career, your relationships, your health. If something significant happens, it will be impossible to miss. Investment, your well-being is not improved by constant stress. And ironically, the people who are calm and grounded tend to make the best decisions when opportunity finally arrives. Investment, let me give you one final scenario. Imagine two holders. Holder A has spent years in emotional turmoil, chasing rumors, making impulsive purchases. Investment, neglecting other financial planning, building expectations so high that reality can only disappoint. Holder B has treated it as a long-shot asset, stored safely. Investment, prepared documentation, built a stable life independently, and maintained balanced expectations. If a positive event occurs, investment, which one is better positioned to benefit fully? Preparation beats obsession. Now let's circle back to the phrase, your time is here. Investment, your time isn't defined by external events alone. It's defined by readiness. Opportunity without readiness creates chaos. Investment, opportunity with readiness creates transformation. So whether 2026 becomes a milestone year, a midpoint, or just another step in a longer journey, Enlistment, the winning strategy remains the same. Stay informed but not consumed. Stay hopeful but not reckless. Stay prepared but not anxious. Stay patient but not passive. Investment. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a currency, it's about how you handle uncertainty, opportunity, and responsibility. All right, guys, investment. That's everything I wanted to share on this topic. No hype, no promises, just realistic perspective and practical preparation. If you've made it this far, investment. You're already ahead of most people because you're choosing understanding over emotion. And whatever happens next, that mindset will serve you far beyond any single event.